It's late. You're lying there, staring at the ceiling, replaying a moment, a glance they gave someone else, a silence that lasted too long. And the thought surfaces, quiet and corrosive. I am simply not enough. The cost of letting that thought govern you? You vanish. Not physically, but inwardly. And 2,000 years ago, Epictetus already diagnosed exactly what creates this slow erasure and the precise method to reverse it. Tonight, we will move through 3 revelations. First, why feeling not enough is a philosophical misdiagnosis, not a factual verdict. Second, what Stoic doctrine says about the inner faculty, the hegemonikon, that you have surrendered to others. Third, a precise daily practice to reclaim it. But the deepest truth, the one that changes everything, waits at the very end. Here is the wound. You have spent years measuring your worth through someone else's attention. When they look at you warmly, you feel real. When they look away, you dissolve. This is not love. It is a form of psychological exile you have imposed on yourself. You have outsourced the most sacred human function, the judgment of your own value. And that outsourcing costs everything. Psychologists call this contingent self-worth. The Stoics called it something far more precise: dependence on externals, on what Epictetus named ta ektos, the things outside your ruling faculty. In his discourses, written in the 1st century, he stated it plainly: seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The feeling of not being enough is not a symptom of your inadequacy. It is a symptom of philosophical confusion, a category error. You have taken an external, their approval, their desire, their attention, and placed it inside the column of necessary goods. The Stoics called this false promotion, and it is the root of every ache you carry into 3 a.m. Epictetus was born a slave. In Hierapolis, around 50 AD, he owned nothing. Not his body, not his labor, not his freedom of movement. And yet, he arrived at a discovery that no emperor could purchase: the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the soul, is inviolable. No one can enter it without your consent. The moment you understand this, the entire architecture of not enough begins to collapse. Here is the Stoic diagnosis in its full precision. When you feel unworthy of someone's attention, your hegemonikon, your sovereign inner reason, has issued a false judgment. It has concluded that your value is a function of their response. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 4, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. The wound is always a thought. Thoughts yield to discipline." And if this reflection is stirring something real in you, subscribe. What arrives in the next minutes matters even more. Now, the Stoic concept of apatheia, not indifference in the casual sense, but freedom from disordered passion. It does not mean you stop caring. It means you refuse to let reactive emotion overrule your logos, your rational faculty. You still feel, but you are no longer governed by feelings that are built on false premises. Seneca, writing to Lucilius from his villa in 62 AD, described the practice of premeditatio malorum, the deliberate rehearsal of adversity. He was not teaching pessimism, he was teaching inoculation. When you premeditate the possibility of rejection, of being unseen, of being insufficient in someone's eyes, and you rehearse your rational response, you rob that moment of its power to collapse your inner structure. You arrive prepared. You arrive whole. Now we reach the second pattern interrupt. Wait, because what comes next is what few who suffer this wound ever truly understand. The practice of prosoche, vigilant attention to your own inner state, is not self-obsession, it is the opposite. It is the courageous act of watching your own mind make its false moves, catching the moment you hand your value over to another, and refusing. This is where attraction is actually born. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you seek any signal of validation from the external world, sit for 5 minutes in deliberate prosoche. Ask, what judgments did I make yesterday about my worth that depended entirely on someone else's behavior? Write them down. Then, apply the dichotomy of control. Epictetus was ruthless here. What is not in your power is nothing to you. What is in your power is everything. And it is enough. Add to this a second practice, amor fati, the love of your own fate. Not resignation, not passive acceptance, an active, fierce embrace of exactly who and where you are. Marcus Aurelius practiced this relentlessly. He was emperor of Rome and yet wrote to himself, confine yourself to the present. Not the present where you are inadequate, the present where you are complete, within your own logos, your own reason, your own sovereign soul. The third practice is this. Cultivate arete, virtue, excellence, as your primary attractor. Not as performance, but as genuine becoming. Stoicism is not passive. It demands that you actively construct yourself into someone whose inner quality radiates outward. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, taught in the Athenian Stoa Poikile around 300 BC that virtue alone constitutes the good. When you embody that, you do not chase, you draw. In the winter of 1837, in a small rented room in Concord, Massachusetts, the philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson, deeply influenced by Stoic doctrine, wrote in his journal, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles." He was 34, professionally uncertain, personally shaken by grief. Yet he chose the interior life over the approval of contemporaries. Within 5 years, he transformed American thought. The inner work preceded the outer magnetism. Here is what Epictetus understood that your 3 a.m. mind forgets. You were never incomplete. You assigned incompleteness to yourself the moment you accepted someone else's indifference as a verdict. The technique revealed: practice prosoche each morning, apply the dichotomy of control ruthlessly, and embody arete as your daily offering to the world. These 3 acts, sustained, do not just restore you, they make you undeniable. The Stoics did not promise you that others will always see your worth. They promised something greater, that you will never again depend on their seeing it. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow, we explore what Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal each night before sleep. The bell ensures you miss nothing. Now ask yourself, whose verdict have you been living under? And when did you stop being your own philosopher? You walk into a room, and no one turns. You speak, and the words dissolve like smoke. You send the message, do the work, offer the gesture, and silence answers you. This isn't loneliness. It's something sharper, the specific ache of being present and unseen. The cost of staying here is not just pain, it's the slow erosion of your will. But what if invisibility is not a wound? What if it's an initiation? 2,000 years ago, Epictetus, a man who began life as a literal slave, already knew exactly why being ignored might be the most powerful position you'll ever occupy. We will move through 3 territories tonight. First, the anatomy of invisibility, what it actually does to the soul, and why most people misread it entirely. Second, the Stoic philosophy that transforms being ignored from a verdict into a forge. Third, the practical discipline, what you do with your hands and your mind on the days nobody sees you. But the revelation that closes this, the thing Epictetus said in chains, will reframe everything that came before it. There is a particular quality to being ignored that ordinary loneliness does not carry. Loneliness is about absence. Invisibility is about presence without acknowledgement. You are there, fully there, and the world performs its indifference with almost surgical precision. A colleague takes credit for your work. A conversation reshapes itself around a gap where your voice should be. The people you love most look through you as though you were furniture. This is the wound. Not that you don't exist, but that your existence registers as irrelevant. The psychological damage compounds quietly. Neuroscience and ancient philosophy agree on this, if nothing else. Sustained social invisibility mimics the same neural signature as physical pain. The brain does not distinguish cleanly between a broken arm and a broken sense of worth. And so, you begin to adapt. You shrink your opinions. You perform louder versions of yourself, hoping to be registered. You become, slowly, imperceptibly, someone you would not recognize in calmer waters. The tragedy is not the original wound. It's what you build around it. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Every great Stoic philosopher was, at a defining moment in his life, profoundly invisible. Marcus Aurelius spent years as a reluctant heir, deliberately overlooked by the court of Hadrian, writing philosophy in margins that no one was supposed to read. Seneca was exiled to Corsica for 8 years, erased from Rome's conversation entirely. Epictetus spent his early decades as property, legally voiceless. Their invisibility was not incidental. It was the condition inside which their philosophy crystallized. What they forged there became the foundation of Western inner life. Epictetus opens the Enchiridion, his foundational manual, with a distinction that sounds almost too simple until you sit with it long enough to feel its full weight. He writes, "Some things are in our control, and others not." The Greek term is the dichotomy of control. Your reputation, other people's perception, whether you are seen or celebrated, these are externals, what Epictetus calls ta ektos. They are, by Stoic definition, indifferent, adiaphora, not worthless, but not yours. Your judgment,
your values, your response to invisibility. These are yours entirely. This is the first cut of the Stoic scalpel.
Here is the deepest paradox Stoicism offers. The person who does not need to be seen is the most powerful person in any room. The Stoics called this apatheia, not the modern word apathy, which implies indifference born of defeat, but a disciplined freedom from the passions that make external validation feel like oxygen. When you no longer need the room to turn when you enter, the room loses its authority over you. Your hegemonicon, your ruling faculty, the commanding center of the soul, remains sovereign. And sovereignty is incompatible with invisibility as a wound. If this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next matters even more. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the most powerful empire on earth, wrote privately in his Meditations, Book 6, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was not writing for posterity. No audience was ever intended. He was practicing prosoche, vigilant attention to the internal landscape, the ongoing self-examination that kept his hegemonicon intact. Here was the most visible man alive, writing as though no one would ever read him. That discipline, the act of doing deep work for its own integrity, is the Stoic antidote to invisibility. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, written from retirement, deliberately withdrawn from Rome's noise, articulates what he calls the gift of withdrawal. Recede in te ipse, retire into yourself. When the world ignores you, he argues, it has accidentally handed you the rarest commodity in Roman public life, time, uncontested by performance. Invisibility, Seneca insists, is the fertile soil of philosophy. The man who must be seen at every banquet, praised at every forum, is a man whose interiority starves. The man nobody watches is free to become someone magnificent in private. Wait, what comes next is what few who study Stoicism truly understand. Being ignored is not merely tolerable within the Stoic framework. It is, in precise technical terms, an opportunity to practice what Marcus Aurelius called amor fati, love of fate. Not passive resignation, that is the counterfeit. Amor fati is the active, chosen embrace of exactly what is. The Stoic does not merely accept invisibility, he minds it. He asks, what does my logos, my capacity for rational alignment with cosmic reason, demand of me in this exact condition? That question transforms humiliation into instruction. Tomorrow, when the silence greets you again, do not fill it with performance. Instead, begin the practice the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, deliberate premeditation of adversity. Each morning, acknowledge this. Today, I may be ignored. Today, my work may go unrecognized. Today, the room may not turn. Then ask, explicitly, in writing if possible, what virtue does this day require of me regardless of who is watching? Epictetus taught his students to ask, not what did they think, but did I act in accordance with my best nature? That internal tribunal is the only one that governs arete. The second practice is what Musonius Rufus, the Roman Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus himself, called the discipline of action without audience. Musonius argued that virtue practiced in public is always slightly corrupted by the gaze of witnesses. True character is revealed in what you do when no recognition is possible. He required his students to perform acts of integrity in absolute obscurity, anonymous generosity, private study, labor that left no record. The logic is precise. If your goodness depends on being seen, it is not goodness, it is theater. Strip the audience away. What remains is your actual character. The third practice is memento mori, applied to recognition itself. Remember, the applause of any given era is temporary. Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism in 301 BCE in the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch in Athens, was ignored, then ridiculed, then tolerated, then celebrated, then ignored again across centuries. The verdict of your moment is not the verdict of your life, and the verdict of your life is not the verdict of your worth. Marcus Aurelius buried 3 of his own children and continued his daily philosophical practice. Grief, invisibility, loss, each was raw material, never final judgment. In 65 CE, Seneca received a message from Emperor Nero. He was ordered to take his own life. His final hours, recorded by Tacitus in the Annals, are almost unbearably illuminating. Surrounded by weeping friends, Seneca remained composed. He dictated philosophy until the end. He had spent decades preparing for exactly this, the moment when the world's verdict and his internal standard would face each other directly. He had written in Letter 77, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." His invisibility to Nero's empire became his immortality in ours. Here, then, is the revelation promised at the opening. The Stoic power of being ignored is not that invisibility stops hurting. It does not. The dichotomy of control does not anesthetize pain. It reclassifies it. The ache of not being seen remains real. What changes is its jurisdiction. It moves from the hegemonikon, your sovereign faculty, into the category of ta ektos, the externals, the indifferent, the things that do not own you. You stop building your identity on a foundation that other people's attention controls. What you build on what remains is indestructible. This is not a consolation. This is a philosophy, a complete architecture for a life. Epictetus, who was once ignored because he was property, became the most quoted philosopher of the Roman imperial court. Not because he sought recognition, because he refused to let its absence diminish him. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we explore what Marcus Aurelius wrote each night before sleep and why it changes everything. The bell ensures you don't miss it. One final question to carry into your silence. If no one ever acknowledged your deepest work, would it still be worth doing?
You're in the room. People are talking, laughing, performing. And you feel it, that invisible pull to prove yourself, to be louder, sharper, more impressive. You give in. Later, alone, something hollow lingers. You said too much, revealed too much. The cost of that hunger for approval is quiet, but devastating. What if the most magnetic thing you can become requires saying almost nothing at all? 2,000 years ago, Epictetus already knew exactly why you keep losing your power. We'll explore 3 things. First, why the hunger for approval is the root of all social weakness. Then, the Stoic discipline of silence and self-command that transforms how others perceive you. Finally, what true inner authority looks like and why it radiates outward without effort. But the real revelation, the discipline that binds all three, comes at the very end. What you discover there will permanently alter how you move through every room.
Here is the wound most people carry without naming it. They need the room to confirm they exist. Every glance, every laugh at their joke, every nod of agreement becomes evidence they matter. Epictetus called this the most dangerous form of slavery, surrendering your hegemonikon, your ruling faculty, to the judgment of strangers. When your inner world is governed by external reaction, you are not free. You are performing. And the audience always senses the desperation behind the performance.
Watch what happens in any gathering. The person who speaks first, loudest, most often, they are not commanding the room. They are begging it. The words are plentiful, but weightless. People listen politely and move on. Meanwhile, someone else sits quietly, speaks rarely, and when they do, the room shifts. Heads turn. Conversations pause. That person has something the loud one sacrifices with every anxious word. Gravity. Gravity is not performed. It is preserved through restraint.
Seneca wrote in his letters to Lucilius, and these were not abstract philosophy, they were urgent dispatches. Every time you step outside, beware. The crowd will contaminate you. He meant this precisely. Every unnecessary conversation, every performance of wit, every opinion offered without invitation costs something, invisible but irreplaceable, your inner coherence. The Stoics called the preservation of that coherence prosoche, vigilant attention to the self. Without it, the self scatters, and scattered men are never respected.
But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Most people hear silence and restraint and picture a cold, closed-off person, someone who withholds warmth, builds walls, wins respect through intimidation. That is not the Stoic ideal at all. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded the Roman Empire for nearly 2 decades, was described by those around him as genuinely warm, deeply attentive, and profoundly interested in others. His restraint was not distance, it was discipline. There is an enormous difference. The Stoic discipline at the heart of this is called apatheia, and it is chronically misunderstood. It does not mean indifference to life. It means freedom from irrational passion, from the reactive emotional storms that make a person unpredictable and therefore unsafe. When you achieve apatheia, you become consistent. People always know what they are getting with you. Consistency is the foundation of trust. Trust is the foundation of respect. Respect, sustained over time, is what the world calls irresistible.
Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 5 of his Meditations, his private journal, never intended for publication, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the dichotomy of control that Epictetus built his entire philosophy upon. What is yours? Judgment, intention, response. What is not? Others' opinions, outcomes, the room's reaction. When you stop fighting for what was never yours, your energy consolidates. Consolidated energy is what others feel when you enter.
And if this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next cuts even deeper into the ancient source of personal power. Consider what the Stoics called officium, duty. Not duty as obligation imposed from outside, but duty as the natural expression of who you have chosen to become. When a person operates from clear duty, toward excellence, toward virtue, toward the people they genuinely love, their actions carry a quality that others cannot quite name, but deeply feel. It reads as integrity. Integrity draws people in without trying. Wait. What comes next is what few truly understand about Stoic self-mastery. Most self-improvement content tells you to project confidence, to optimize your body language, to craft a personal brand. The Stoics would find this almost comical. Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism in Athens around 300 BCE while teaching in the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, said simply, "Live according to nature." Your nature includes logos, cosmic reason, the rational principle that connects you to the universe's own structure. Align with logos. Nothing else is needed.
Here is the practice. Tomorrow morning, before you speak a single word, pause. Epictetus taught that between impulse and action, there is a sacred space, the space where your hegemonicon, your ruling faculty, governs. In that space, ask one question. Does this word serve virtue, or does it serve my need for approval? If the answer is the latter, withhold it. Do this for 1 week. You will find your words become fewer, heavier, and more astonishing in their effect on others. Second practice. Practice premeditatio malorum, Seneca's method of deliberately imagining difficulty before it arrives. Each evening, sit with 5 minutes of uninterrupted silence. Ask, what could go wrong tomorrow? What slight might I receive? What temptation to react, to defend, to perform? Rehearse your measured response in advance. This is not pessimism. It is fortification. The person who has already faced their fears in imagination is unmoved when those fears appear in reality. Unmoved people are perceived as powerful. Third practice. Cultivate selective speech. The Roman Stoic Musonius Rufus, less famous than Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, but arguably their equal in rigor, instructed his students to speak only when silence would be inferior. Consider that standard. Not when you feel like speaking, not when you want to be heard. Only when silence itself would be the lesser choice. Applied daily, this discipline restructures your relationship with attention. You stop needing it. And the moment you stop needing it, you begin to command it. In 161 CE, Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome at age 40. He had spent 20 years preparing, studying, practicing, failing privately, refining his character in relative obscurity. When power finally arrived, contemporaries noted something extraordinary. He did not change. The same man who had written quietly in his journal continued writing quietly as emperor. Same temperament, same discipline, same measured speech. Cassius Dio, the historian, recorded that soldiers loved him not for speeches, but for his unmistakable steadiness. That steadiness was the product of decades of prosoche, vigilant, daily self-attention.
The discipline you have been building toward is this:
the complete withdrawal of your self-worth from external confirmation. The Stoics called externals adiaphora, indifferent things, not evil, not worthless, simply not the ground of your identity. When you no longer need the room's approval to feel whole, you stop performing. And when you stop performing, something ancient and genuine emerges, a presence others cannot manufacture or fake. That is what Epictetus promised. That is the discipline, and the room will feel it before you say a single word. Everything begins here, the quiet withdrawal of approval-seeking, the daily practice of prosoche, the courage to let silence speak first. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we go deeper into what Marcus Aurelius wrote each night before sleep. The bell ensures you don't miss it. Ask yourself now, what would you become if the only approval you ever needed was your... Every compliment you've ever chased has cost you something you cannot name. There are exactly 7 signs you are wasting your life seeking approval from people who cannot even govern their own thoughts. And number 7 is the one almost no philosopher dares to speak plainly. By the end of this, you will see yourself differently. Brace for that discomfort. Number 1. You edit yourself before you speak. Not once, constantly. Before every sentence, a tribunal convenes inside your mind, judging the words before they leave your lips. Epictetus identified this in his discourses, written around 108 AD. The hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the soul, must serve reason, not the imagined reactions of a crowd. When others govern your words, you have surrendered your command post. Every rehearsed word is a small act of self-erasure. You perform a version of yourself calculated for approval, and over weeks, months, years, you forget which version is real. The Stoics called this failure of prosoche, vigilant attention to one's own inner state. Without it, you drift. You begin living inside other people's imaginations of you, confusing their comfort with your truth. That is not living. That is haunting. Number 2, you feel genuine physical relief when someone agrees with you. Notice this carefully. When another person nods, something inside you unnods. That unnodding is the evidence. You have been holding tension against the possibility of their disapproval. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, Book 6, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it." Replace anger with approval-seeking. The math is identical. That wave of relief you mistake for connection is pharmacological. Your nervous system has been conditioned to treat social approval as safety. This is not philosophy. This is the psychology of a creature that has forgotten it is free. Stoic discipline, ascesis, is the deliberate practice of tolerating disapproval until the body learns what the mind already knows. Another person's opinion is, in Epictetus's language, not up to us. It belongs to the category of externals. Number 3, you remember criticism for years, but forget praise within days. Recall a compliment you received last month. Difficult, isn't it? Now, recall an insult from 3 years ago. Vivid, precise, almost audible. This asymmetry reveals the architecture of a mind organized around external judgment. Seneca warned in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 5, retire into yourself as much as you can. The one who cannot forget criticism
has not yet retired inward.
And if this reflection is stirring something deep in you, subscribe. What comes next on this channel will matter even more to your inner work. Number 4, you change your stated opinion the moment someone pushes back. Not because new evidence emerged, because their displeasure became unbearable. This is the collapse of what Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism in Athens around 300 BC, called the logos-governed life. Logos is cosmic reason operating through you. When social pressure overrides your reasoned judgment, you have replaced logos with noise. You are no longer thinking, you are performing agreement.
The Stoic concept of arete, virtue, excellence of character, demands internal consistency. Virtue is not what you express when it is safe. It is what you maintain when it costs you something. Musonius Rufus, the Roman Stoic who taught in the 1st century AD, wrote that philosophy untested by adversity is merely decoration. Changing your opinion under social pressure is not open-mindedness. It is the adiaphora, treating your convictions as indifferent when they are not.
Number 5, you feel hollow after receiving the approval you worked so hard to earn. This is the most diagnostic sign. You pursued the compliment, received it, and felt nothing lasting. Perhaps even shame. The Stoics understood this through their concept of eudaimonia, the flourishing that comes only through virtue, not through external validation. Approval from others is, by Stoic classification, a preferred indifferent. Useful, perhaps, but never constitutive of the good life.
Seneca captured it precisely in De Brevitate Vitae, written around 49 AD. Men sacrifice enormous portions of their lives chasing what, once obtained, leaves them more impoverished than before. The hunger does not end with feeding, it intensifies. This is the structural trap of approval seeking. It is designed to require more. Each validation raises the floor. You are not filling a vessel. You are pouring into a drain. And somewhere beneath the applause, you already know this.
Number 6, you make major life decisions based on what will look acceptable to others. Career, relationships, where you live, what you study. These are the coordinates of a life, and you have allowed other people's imaginations to set them. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 3, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. A life chosen for appearance breaks both, quietly, over decades."
The Stoics taught officium, duty, but duty to logos, to reason, to virtue, not duty to the crowd's expectations. Epictetus, who was born a slave in Hierapolis around 50 AD, understood better than any free Roman what it meant to have your choices colonized by another's will. He wrote in the Enchiridion, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life."
Number 7, the one almost no one names plainly. You are not afraid of their judgment. You are afraid of your own. Every time you seek approval, you are outsourcing a verdict you do not trust yourself to deliver. The real question you are asking is not, do they think I am good? The real question is, am I good? And you cannot face answering it alone. That is the wound beneath all the performance.
The Stoics called self-examination the highest practice. Memento mori, remember that you will die, was not merely about mortality. It was a confrontation with the self before time ran out. You will not have time, at the end, to collect enough approval to finally feel worthy. The apatheia the Stoics sought, freedom from disordered passion, begins exactly here, in the moment you stop asking others to confirm what only your own reasoned judgment can establish.
Every sign pointed inward. The editing, the relief, the remembered wounds, the collapsed opinions, the hollow victories, the borrowed life. And finally, the judgment you feared was always your own. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we go deeper into Stoic self-examination and how Epictetus rebuilt identity from nothing. The bell ensures you don't miss it. Now ask yourself, whose voice has been narrating your choice? You trusted someone completely. You gave them access to your inner world, your plans, your fears, your loyalty, and they used it against you. Now it's late. The silence in the room feels heavier than any argument. You keep replaying the moment you realized the truth. Here is the real cost. Not the betrayal itself, but the slow erosion of your mind each time you revisit it. What if the wound isn't what they did, but what you keep doing with it?
2,000 years ago, Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about this exact corrosion. He called it the tyranny of the mind turned against itself. Tonight, we will move through 3 revelations. First, why betrayal destroys us from the inside rather than the outside. Second, the precise Stoic architecture for reclaiming your ruling faculty. And third, how to transform the wound into something iron. The real revelation waits at the end. Betrayal does not wound the body. It wounds the hegemonicon, what the Stoics called the ruling faculty of the soul, the seat of reason and judgment. When someone we trusted violates that trust, we experience a rupture not merely between two people, but inside our own inner architecture. Suddenly, the faculty designed to guide us is flooded with rage, shame, and obsessive review. The mind becomes its own enemy. This is where the real destruction begins. Epictetus, born a slave, stripped of every external possession, understood betrayal at the structural level of existence. He wrote in the Enchiridion, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." The person who betrayed you committed an act in the external world, but the suffering you carry now lives entirely inside your own judgment. That distinction is not a consolation. It is a surgical instrument. Here is what no one tells you about betrayal. The person who betrayed you has already moved on. They are not lying awake reviewing the moment. You are. Which means the extended suffering is not punishment delivered by them. It is punishment you are delivering to yourself, repeatedly, voluntarily. The Stoics had a word for this self-inflicted torment: pathe, disordered passions that override reason. You have become the jailer of your own hegemonicon. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Stoics did not ask you to suppress your pain or perform false serenity. Seneca explicitly warned against that mask. What they prescribed was something far more demanding: prosoche, vigilant, unflinching attention to your own inner movements. You must watch the anger arrive, name it,
Trace it back to its origin in your own judgment. This is not comfort. This is cognitive surgery performed on yourself. Awake.
Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, a journal never meant for publication, these words: "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He was not writing philosophy for admiration. He wrote it at war, betrayed by generals, abandoned by allies, watching the empire fracture. His private discipline was the dichotomy of control, relentlessly separating what lies within his faculty from what lies outside it. Betrayal falls outside. Your response falls inside.
And if this reflection is stirring something real in you, subscribe. What comes next cuts even deeper into the Stoic method. The concept Marcus Aurelius used is called the dichotomy of control, not as a platitude, but as a daily practice of forensic precision. Every morning, he would inventory his impressions. What can I govern today, and what cannot be governed? Betrayal by another person lives permanently in the ungovernable column. Your virtue, your response, your character, those belong entirely to you. Now comes the deeper Stoic architecture. Seneca introduced premeditatio malorum, the deliberate premeditation of adversity. Before trusting anyone deeply, the Stoic mind rehearses loss, not out of pessimism, but out of clarity. When you have already contemplated the possibility of betrayal, the event, when it arrives, finds a mind that has prepared the terrain. It does not destroy unprepared ground. This is not paranoia. This is the armor of a philosopher, expected, reasoned, and ready.
Adiaphora, the Stoic category of indifference. What does this mean for betrayal? The person who wronged you, their opinion of you, their actions, these are externals. They are adiaphora, neither inherently good nor bad, because they lie beyond your governing faculty. Your character is not diminished by what they did. Only you can diminish your own character by responding without virtue. Epictetus said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are."
Wait, what comes next is what few people truly understand about the Stoic response to betrayal. Most assume Stoicism means distance, cold withdrawal, emotional shutdown. That is a fundamental misreading. The Stoics cultivated apatheia, not numbness, but freedom from disordered passion. The difference is profound. Apatheia allows deep feeling, grief, love, indignation, while the hegemonicon remains in command. You feel the fire without being consumed by it. That is not detachment. That is mastery.
Here is the practical application. Tomorrow morning, before the world demands anything from you, sit with a single sheet of paper. Write 2 columns. What is within my ruling faculty today, and what is not. Place the betrayal, the person, and their actions firmly in the second column. Then write in the first column 1 virtue you will embody despite what happened. Not for them, for the coherence of your own character. This is officium, your duty to your own inner architecture. In the second week, add a second practice, the evening review, what Epictetus called the examination of impressions. Before sleep, trace every moment when you allowed the betrayal to govern your mood, your words, or your decisions without your conscious consent. Do not judge yourself. Only observe, name,
and return governance to the hegemonicon. This nightly forensic audit is not punishment. It is the slow, deliberate reclamation of the inner citadel that no external person can breach if you maintain it.
The amor fati practice is the final and most demanding tool. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Love your fate." Not tolerate it, love it. This means actively willing that the betrayal happened, because it has become part of the logos, the rational structure of the universe in which your character is being forged. This is not surrender. This is the highest assertion of Stoic will, to take the very thing that tried to break you and declare that it belongs in your story and serves your becoming.
In 65 AD, Seneca was ordered by Emperor Nero, his former student, to take his own life. The ultimate betrayal. A man he had mentored for years, now demanding his death. Witnesses recorded that Seneca dictated philosophy until the final moment, speaking of virtue to those around him. He told his weeping friends, "Where are your maxims of philosophy, or the preparation of so many years' study against evils to come?" He did not collapse. The Stoic architecture held. That is what we are building here.
The promise from the beginning. There is a single sentence that ends the tyranny of betrayal. Here it is, from Epictetus, written in the 2nd century. It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. The wound was real. The person failed you. And none of that has power over your hegemonicon unless you grant it. You were not destroyed. You are being forged. If this moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we examine what Marcus Aurelius did each night before sleep. Does betrayal define you or refine? It's 2 a.m. You're lying still, but your mind is sprinting. You're replaying a conversation from 3 days ago. What you said, what they meant, what you should have done. Nobody is watching you. No crisis is unfolding. Yet your own skull has become a prison. The cost? Your health, your clarity, your days. What if the enemy isn't the world, but your own unguarded mind? Seneca already knew the answer. We'll explore 3 ideas that changed how the ancient world understood the mind. First, why overthinking is not a thinking problem, it's a judgment problem. Second, how Seneca's concept of recollecting the self dismantles the spiral. Third, the precise daily disciplines Stoics used to reclaim sovereign control over thought. But the real revelation comes at the end. A single sentence Seneca wrote that reframes everything. Here is what nobody tells you about overthinking. It does not feel like a flaw. It feels like diligence. It masquerades as preparation, as care, as intelligence. You tell yourself you're solving the problem. But Seneca, writing from Rome in 65 AD, saw through it completely. He wrote, "There is nothing so ruinous to a good character as to idle away one's time at a show. For vices creep in gradually through the guise of virtue."
The Stoics identified something precise. It is never the event that wounds you. It is the judgment you assign to it. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became philosophy's sharpest voice, stated it plainly in the Enchiridion. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions about things. Your mind is not replaying the argument. It is replaying your verdict about the argument. That verdict lives inside you,
and only you can revise it.
This is the Stoic distinction that changes everything, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus divided all of reality into two columns. In the first column, your judgments, your desires, your chosen responses, things entirely yours. In the second column, reputation, outcomes, other people's words, none of it yours. Overthinking is what happens when you treat column 2 as if it belongs in column 1. You are pouring energy into territory you do not own.
And if this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next reaches even deeper into Stoic discipline. Now, Seneca adds a layer Epictetus does not. He doesn't just tell you what to stop judging. He tells you what your mind does in the absence of judgment. It wanders. In his letters to Lucilius, he warns against what he calls the restless mind, one that travels everywhere and masters nothing. The wandering mind, he argues, cannot heal itself because it never stays still long enough to examine itself.
But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Seneca was not a monk. He was not retreating from the world. He was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, advisor to Emperor Nero, constantly surrounded by noise, politics, and moral compromise. He wrote his most profound letters while imprisoned by proximity to power. His philosophy was forged inside the very conditions you face: distraction, pressure, impossible people. His inner peace was not inherited. It was constructed.
The core Stoic tool Seneca prescribes is what he calls recollectio, the practice of gathering yourself back inward. In Letter 2, he writes, "Withdraw into yourself as much as you can." This is not escapism. This is prosoche, vigilant attention turned toward the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the soul. The Stoics believed your mind has a governing center. Overthinking is what happens when that center abdicates its authority and lets every passing impression command the whole.
Seneca's prescription is radical in its simplicity. Stop adding more thinking to the spiral. Instead, examine the first thought. He called this practice the review of the day. Each evening, sitting in silence and asking 3 precise questions. What weakness did I exhibit today? What passion governed me when reason should have? Where did I mistake opinion for reality? This is not self-punishment. This is the Stoic equivalent of recalibrating a compass before a long journey.
There is also premeditatio malorum, the deliberate rehearsal of difficulty before it arrives. Seneca used this not to breed anxiety, but to dissolve it. When you have already imagined the worst with calm reason, the mind has no catastrophe left to manufacture. The spiral loses its fuel. Most people flee the thought of difficulty. The Stoic moves toward it, with the hegemonikon fully engaged, stripping it of the power that comes only from surprise and avoidance. And then there is apatheia. Not apathy, but freedom from unexamined passion. The Stoics were not emotionless. They felt deeply, but they refused to let unchecked emotion commandeer the logos, the rational faculty aligned with cosmic reason. Zeno of Citium, who founded Stoicism around 300 BC in Athens, taught that passions arising from false judgment must be corrected at their root. You do not suppress the feeling. You correct the mistaken verdict that generated it.
Wait. What comes next is what few who study Stoicism ever fully grasp. Inner peace in the Stoic tradition is not a destination. It is not a reward granted after you have solved all problems. Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, military commander, wrote the Meditations not as a published masterpiece, but as private notes to himself. He was struggling. Every page is him fighting his own restless hegemonicon. Peace was his daily labor, not his permanent condition.
So here is what Seneca demands of you in practice. Tomorrow morning, before you open any device, sit for 5 minutes in deliberate silence. Do not solve anything. Do not plan. Practice prosoche, vigilant attention toward your own ruling faculty. Ask, which thought is mine, and which thought owns me? Name one worry you are carrying that belongs in Epictetus's second column. Then release your jurisdiction over it. Not emotionally, rationally, because it was never yours to govern.
In 65 AD, Seneca received word that Nero had ordered his death. He had no appeal, no escape. He gathered his friends, spoke calmly, and in his final hours dictated philosophical notes. According to Tacitus, he said, "Is it so surprising that a man who has long prepared himself should meet his fate without distress?" He was not performing courage. He had practiced premeditatio malorum so thoroughly that even this held no power to unravel him. That is the evidence.
The sentence Seneca wrote that reframes everything, the one promised at the beginning, is from letter 1. Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is foreign to us. Time alone is ours. Overthinking steals the only thing you truly possess. Every spiral you feed is time you surrender. The mind that cannot be governed cannot be lived in, and the mind that is governed need not flee the world. It simply stops being ruled by it.
You began this in a dark room at 2 a.m. The loop running was not the world's doing. It was an unguarded hegemonicon. Seneca's answer was never silence. It was sovereignty. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we explore what Marcus Aurelius wrote each night before sleep and why it matters to you now. The bell ensures you won't miss it. One question to carry forward. Which thought is governing your mind right now? And did you
Most people will spend their entire lives measuring themselves against others and never once ask why. The ego is not loud. It is patient, surgical, and it destroys from the inside. There are exactly 5 daily habits that make you immune to ego and comparison. And number 5 is the one almost no one practices, because it demands something the modern world has trained you to never surrender.
Number 1. The morning audit of judgment. Epictetus, the freed slave who became the most unbreakable thinker of antiquity, wrote in the Enchiridion that it is not events, but our judgments about events that disturb us. Every morning, before any screen or conversation touches you, sit in deliberate silence and examine the first 3 automatic judgments your mind produces about yourself or others. Write them down.
These judgments are the raw material of ego and comparison. They rise before reason arrives. The Stoic term for the ruling faculty of the soul, the hegemonicon, is precisely the part of you capable of intercepting these automatic verdicts. When you write them without self-defense, you expose the machinery. You see that most comparison is not ambition. It is unexamined fear dressed in competitive clothing.
Number 2.
the deliberate practice of arete, overachievement. The Stoics drew a radical distinction the modern world has almost entirely erased. External achievement, wealth, rank, recognition, belongs to the category of adiaphora, the indifference, things neither good nor bad in themselves. Only arete, virtue, moral excellence, constitutes genuine good. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire and wrote privately that his only real work was the discipline of the soul.
The daily practice is simple and severe. Before each significant action, ask not what outcome you want, but what quality of character you intend to bring. Replace the question, "Will I win?" with, "Will I act with integrity?" This single substitution dismantles comparison at its foundation. You cannot genuinely compare your virtue to another's because virtue is not a rank, it is a direction. And if this reflection is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next matters even more. Number 3. Prosoche, the evening inventory of attention. The Stoics practiced what they called prosoche, vigilant, sustained attention to the movements of one's own soul throughout the day. Seneca formalized this into an evening ritual. In his letters to Lucilius, written in 65 AD near Naples, just before his forced death under Nero, he described examining each day's conduct with the rigor of a judge and the mercy of a teacher. Every evening, ask 3 precise questions. Where today did I act from ego rather than principle? Where did comparison corrupt my attention? Where did I treat another person's success as a threat rather than as evidence of what is humanly possible? These are not questions for self-punishment. They are instruments of calibration. The hegemonicon, your ruling faculty, grows precise only through daily interrogation. Without it, ego operates invisibly, and comparison becomes the silent metric of your life. Number 4. Voluntary adversity, premeditatio malorum applied to status. Seneca, in his moral letters, prescribed periodic exercises in deliberate discomfort, wearing plain clothing in public, eating simply, sleeping on hard ground. But his deeper intention was psychological, to demonstrate to yourself that your sense of worth does not depend on the signals of status. This is premeditatio malorum, directed not at catastrophe, but at the small humiliations of ordinary ego. The daily application. Once each week, deliberately remove one status signal from your routine. Eat alone without documentation. Wear something ordinary. Complete valuable work that no one will see or credit. Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's own teacher, argued that philosophy practiced only in words is theater. The test of Stoic conviction is behavioral. Each voluntary surrender of status is a controlled experiment, proving to the hegemonicon to show that its stability does not depend on external validation. Each time you do this and survive it intact, you inscribe a new datum in the rational soul. I am not my rank. I am not the room's opinion of me. Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism, taught on the painted porch in Athens around 300 BC that the wise person carries their worth internally, immovable as the logos itself, the rational principle threading through all existence. The ego feeds on external mirrors. Deprive it of them systematically, and it weakens precisely as virtue strengthens. Number 5, and this is the one almost no one practices. Before we reach it, Understand why the previous four, while powerful, remain incomplete without it. Morning judgment audits sharpen perception. Arete reorients ambition. Prosoche refines self-knowledge. Voluntary adversity builds independence from status. But none of these fully dissolves the deepest root of comparison, the terror of mortality, dressed as the need to matter more than others.
Number 5. Memento mori as a daily cognitive reset. This is not a meditation on despair. It is the most clarifying tool in the Stoic arsenal. Marcus Aurelius, governing 60 million people from Rome in the 2nd century, wrote in his private meditations, "Perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense." Not as theater, as genuine recalibration of what deserves your attention. The practice is this. Each morning, after your judgment audit, write one sentence. "This day is finite, and I will not recover it." Then ask, given that finitude, does the gap between my status and another's matter? Does their follower count, their salary, their social approval alter the quality of the virtue I can practice in the next hour? The answer, examined honestly, with the full weight of mortality behind it, is always no. The ego shrinks before the absolute. Memento mori does not make ambition vanish. It purifies it. Chrysippus, the third head of the Stoic school and arguably its most systematic architect, held that all irrational emotions arise from false value judgments, and that the correction is always a clearer perception of reality. The reality of finitude is the ultimate clarifier. When you know the hours are numbered, you stop auditing your life against others' timelines and start living according to your own logos, your own rational nature. The 5 habits form a complete architecture. Morning judgment audit, arete over achievement, evening prosoche, voluntary adversity, and the daily memento mori reset. Together, they construct what Epictetus called apatheia, not the modern misreading of apathy, but freedom from the tyranny of irrational passion. The ego requires comparison, the way fire requires oxygen. These 5 habits, practiced daily without exception, starve it methodically. The immune person is not indifferent to excellence. They are indifferent to the opinion that measures it. You came here because something in you already suspects that comparison is a borrowed prison. The Stoics knew it in Athens, in Rome, in exile, in chains. The question is whether you will practice immunity or merely admire it. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow we go deeper into amor fati and the Stoic discipline of desire. The bell ensures you miss nothing. Now ask yourself, what did you sacrifice today on the altar of another person's?
You walked into the day already carrying something that wasn't yours. A word someone said, a look that dismissed you, a relationship that slowly poisoned your mornings. You didn't sleep well, and now here you are, rehearsing arguments in your head before breakfast. The real cost? Every morning surrendered to what someone else planted inside you. What if the wound isn't what happened, but what you keep watering? 2,000 years ago, Seneca already knew the cure. By the end, you'll hold it. We'll move through 3 essential territories. First, why toxic environments don't destroy you. Your own unexamined reactions do. Second, what Stoic philosophy specifically prescribes as a morning discipline against psychological contamination. Third, the single internal shift that makes you genuinely untouchable. But the revelation, the ritual that ties all three together, comes only at the end, and it requires everything that precedes it. Here is what the toxic environment actually does. It doesn't injure you directly. It installs a voice, a relentless, corrosive inner narrator that speaks in the other person's language, repeating their dismissals, their cruelty, their indifference, until you mistake that voice for your own. Epictetus, born a slave in first-century Rome, understood this viscerally. He said, "The things outside us were never the problem. We handed our hegemonicon, our ruling faculty, over willingly." The psychological wound of chronic toxicity is this: it colonizes your faculty of judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, what we call meditations, that the obstacle to clear thinking is never external noise, but the internal permission we give it. Every morning, you wake contaminated, not by the difficult person in your life, but by the habit of rehearsing their power over your thoughts. This is the real crisis, and most people never name it precisely. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Stoics were not asking you to become numb, passive, or defeated. Quite the opposite. The entire Stoic project, from Zeno of Citium founding his school on the painted porch in Athens around 300 BCE, was about forging a will so precisely calibrated that external disorder could not realign your internal compass. Not escape, not silence. Active, disciplined sovereignty over the one domain that is truly yours. Epictetus codified this as the dichotomy of control. Some things are in our power: judgment, impulse, desire, aversion. Everything else, by definition, belongs to external fortune. The toxic colleague, the manipulative family member, the friend who erodes you, all adiaphora, indifference. What strikes with full force is your verdict about them. Change the verdict, and you change the entire architecture of your morning. This is not philosophical abstraction. This is precise psychological surgery. And if this precision is already shifting something in you, subscribe. What arrives next in this channel goes deeper than most are willing to go. The Stoic morning ritual requires what Epictetus called prosoche, vigilant attention to the ruling faculty, not casual noticing, an active, almost military-grade monitoring of which impressions you grant authority. Each toxic thought that enters your mind at dawn is an impression demanding your assent. Prosoche means you stand guard at the gate. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every morning without exception. Book 2 of the Meditations opens with a premeditation, premeditatio malorum, a deliberate rehearsal of difficulty before the day begins. He wrote, "Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial." Not as resignation, as inoculation. Name the poison before it names you. This ritual transforms reactive suffering into deliberate readiness. Seneca sharpened this further in his letters to Lucilius, written in 65 CE, near the end of his life, under Nero's court, where toxicity was literally lethal. He prescribed the evening examination. I will keep watch over myself and review my day. But his morning counterpart was equally fierce. Before engaging with anyone, fix your principles. He called it arming the soul with philosophy before the world arms itself against you. The sequence matters profoundly.
Here is the practical architecture of your morning ritual. First, before looking at any message, any notification, any face, spend 5 minutes in what Seneca called retreat into yourself. Sit still, not meditating in any Eastern sense, actively reciting your core principles, what you value, what you will not permit to govern you today. Virtue, arete, is not a feeling, it is a decision, made before the chaos arrives. Make it before breakfast. Make it before words.
Wait, what comes next is what few truly understand, and fewer still apply. The second element of the morning ritual is amor fati, the love of fate, which Marcus Aurelius embedded in his daily practice. Not tolerance of difficulty, not grim acceptance, an active willing of whatever arrives, including the toxic person, as material for your virtue. The contaminating presence in your life is your curriculum. Stoicism does not ask you to love the wound. It asks you to love your response to it.
Third element, the Stoic evening audit, but oriented toward morning victory. Each night, briefly, ask 3 questions. What toxicity did I absorb today without examining? Where did I surrender my hegemonicon, my ruling faculty, unnecessarily? What specific principle will I reinforce tomorrow at dawn? This is not self-punishment. Musonius Rufus, Epictetus' own teacher, called self-examination the forge where character is hammered into strength. Without heat, no tempering occurs. Now apply this tomorrow, concretely. Wake before the world insists upon you. Light something, a candle, a lamp. Speak aloud, not in your mind, 3 principles you will not abandon today, regardless of who tests them. Then deliberately name the most toxic presence you anticipate. Say, this person's behavior is adiaphora and indifferent. My judgment of it is within my power. I choose clarity. This spoken declaration activates a different faculty than mere thought. The voice matters. In the winter of 177 CE, Marcus Aurelius commanded Roman legions on the Danube frontier. Exhausted, betrayed by generals, managing plague, political treachery, and what historians describe as profound personal grief. He did not retreat. Each morning, by recorded account, he wrote in his journal before military councils began. Not prayers, philosophical directives to himself. Confine yourself to the present. The impediment to action advances action. He was emperor of the known world and still needed the ritual. So do you. The ritual promised at the beginning is this. Every toxic person, every corrosive environment, every morning you wake contaminated, all of it is an exam, not a sentence. Seneca wrote, per aspera ad virtutem, through hardship toward virtue. The Stoic does not escape the difficult world. They build a self so precisely governed that the world's toxicity finds no purchase. Your morning ritual is the daily construction of that self. Each repetition is a stone in the wall.
The voice you wake up with tomorrow can be yours, not theirs. That is the entire promise. Prosoche, premeditatio malorum, amor fati. 3 Latin keys to the door they never told you about. If this reflection moved something in you, subscribe. Tomorrow we go deeper into what Marcus Aurelius wrote every night before sleep.
The bell ensures you don't miss it. Now ask yourself, whose voice has been narrating your mornings until...
Most people will spend their entire lives managing anxiety without ever confronting its actual source. They treat symptoms while the root grows deeper. There are exactly 7 brutal truths that dissolve anxiety at its foundation. And number 7 is the one almost no philosopher dares to name plainly. It will reframe everything that came before it. Stay until the end. What follows will cost you comfort, but return you to yourself.
Number 1. Your anxiety is not an enemy. It is a verdict. The Stoics recognized this with surgical clarity. Every wave of anxiety is your hegemonicon, the ruling faculty of the soul, delivering a judgment that something outside your control carries the power to harm you. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The anxiety is not the problem. The verdict is. When you feel anxious before a conversation, a decision, or an outcome, your hegemonicon has already ruled that this external thing is necessary for your well-being. That ruling is the error, not the event itself. Epictetus taught his students in Nicopolis, examine not what troubles you, but what belief about that thing troubles you. Change the verdict, and the anxiety collapses, not suppressed, structurally dismantled from within. Number 2. Control is an illusion you purchased at the price of your peace. The dichotomy of control, Epictetus's most foundational principle, states that only 2 categories exist: what is up to us and what is not. Opinion, impulse, desire, aversion, these are ours. Everything else, body, reputation, wealth, others' actions, these are not. Anxiety blooms precisely in the gap between what we claim as ours and what never was. This truth is brutal because it demands you surrender the fantasy of total control over outcomes, over people, over how the world receives you. And if this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next matters even more. The Stoic practice is not passive resignation. It is radical precision. Invest your entire self in what is genuinely yours, and hold the rest as indifferent, adiaphora, neither chaste nor feared. Number 3. Premeditatio malorum, the deliberate rehearsal of what could go wrong, is not pessimism. It is armor. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." When you rehearse adversity clearly, the anxious imagination loses its weapon, surprise. Anxiety feeds on vague, unnamed dread. Name the thing precisely, and its power diminishes. Most people avoid imagining bad outcomes, believing avoidance is protection. But the mind does not stop generating those images. It simply drives them underground, where they fuel chronic anxiety without a face. Premeditatio malorum forces the dark image into the light of reason. You look at it. You assess it. You ask, can I endure this? And almost always, with brutal honesty, the answer is yes. The fear of the thing exceeds the thing. Number 4. You are not your thoughts. You are what you do with them. The Stoics called the undisciplined stream of impressions phantasia, mental images that arrive uninvited.
Anxiety convinces you that every dark impression is a prophecy. It is not. Epictetus was explicit. The first act of freedom is the pause between the impression and your response. In that pause lives everything. The anxious person collapses that pause entirely.
Prosoche, vigilant attention, is the Stoic discipline of watching your own hegemonikon in real time, not as a detached observer, but as a guard at the gate. You notice the impression. You question its authority. You ask, is this judgment true or merely familiar? Anxiety thrives on the familiar. The mind replays old verdicts because they are well-worn grooves, not because they are accurate. Prosoche is the discipline that widens the groove into a choice.
Number 5. The version of yourself you are protecting does not exist. Anxiety is, at its core, the defense of a constructed self, a reputation, an image, an identity built from others' expectations. The Stoics called this concern for externals a corruption of the soul. Marcus Aurelius stripped it plainly. How much more harmful are the consequences of anger than the circumstances that aroused it? Replace anger with anxiety. The equation holds perfectly. The identity you are guarding, the one that must be seen as competent, worthy, loved, or successful, is constructed from externals. It is not virtue. It is not arete. And because it depends entirely on others' perceptions and unpredictable outcomes, defending it requires constant vigilance. That vigilance is anxiety. The Stoic solution is not to improve the constructed self, but to dissolve its claim on your peace. Virtue alone is sufficient. Nothing outside it needs defending.
Number 6. Time is the dimension where anxiety lives, and you are not required to live there. Anxiety about the future is a misuse of logos, the cosmic reason that the Stoics believed was the ordering principle of all existence. Your logos, your rational faculty, was given to engage with what is real and present. When it is hijacked by hypothetical futures, it becomes a weapon turned against its owner. Seneca's warning was unambiguous. We suffer more in imagination than in reality.
Amor fati, the complete affirmation of what is the Stoic antidote to temporal anxiety. Not passive acceptance, but active embrace. You affirm the present not because it is pleasant, but because it is real, and only the real can be acted upon. The future is not available to your virtue. Only this moment is. Every breath spent in anxious rehearsal of what might happen is a breath stolen from the only life that is actually occurring. This one. Now.
Number 7. And here is the truth almost no one names directly. Anxiety requires your cooperation. It cannot persist without your consent. This is not a consolation. It is a devastating accountability. The Stoics taught apatheia, not emotional numbness, but freedom from the tyranny of undisciplined passion. Apatheia is not achieved by feeling less. It is achieved by judging more accurately. Every moment of anxiety is a moment in which you have agreed to a false verdict about reality.
This is the brutal freedom. If anxiety requires your participation, then you carry both the wound and the key. Not the key others must give you, not the circumstances that must change. Your own hegemonikon, your own judgments, are the architecture of your suffering, and therefore the architecture of your liberation. Epictetus was enslaved, literally, and he was the freest man in the room because he understood this one thing. No external condition can reach your ruling faculty without your permission.
Every brutal truth in this video pointed to a single conclusion. Anxiety is not something happening to you. It is something your judgments are building moment by moment. The Stoics did not promise ease. They promised coherence, a life where your inner world is not at the mercy of the outer one. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow, we go deeper into Stoic premeditatio malorum as a daily practice. Does your anxiety have your permission? You're surrounded by noise, social feeds screaming opinions, co-workers broadcasting every small victory, friends performing ambition loudly while achieving quietly nothing. And somewhere beneath all that static, you can feel it, your own potential suffocating. You keep consuming, keep talking, keep reacting, and nothing changes, nothing grows. What if the problem isn't your circumstances, but the 3 disciplines you've been violating every single day? 2,000 years ago, Epictetus already mapped the exact formula, and the final piece of it will disturb you. We'll move through 3 precise territories. First, what Epictetus called the discipline of study, and why most people practice a counterfeit version. Second, the Stoic doctrine of training the body as an instrument of the soul, not a trophy for others. Third, the radical, almost violent philosophy of silence as strategic power. But the real revelation, the thing that ties all 3 into a single unbreakable formula, comes at the very end. Here is the wound most people carry without naming it. You know what you should be doing. You've read the articles, watched the videos, highlighted the books, but knowing and becoming are separated by an abyss that information alone cannot cross. The ancient Stoics had a precise name for this failure: acrasia, weakness of will, acting against your better judgment. It is the oldest human affliction, and it is destroying your potential in slow, invisible increments every single day.
Epictetus, born a slave in Hierapolis around 50 AD, owned nothing. Not his body, not his freedom, not even his own name. And yet he became the most psychologically precise philosopher of the ancient world. His entire framework rested on one bedrock distinction: what is within our control and what is not. He called it the dichotomy of control. Opinion, impulse, desire, aversion, yours. Everything else, not yours. This single distinction, when truly internalized, reorganizes an entire life. The first element of the formula is study, but not the passive consumption you mistake for learning. Epictetus demanded what he called prosoche, vigilant, disciplined attention directed inward. Real study means interrogating your own judgments. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not for publication, but as a private self-examination conducted every morning and night for decades. Not to feel wise, to find where he was still wrong, still reactive, still weak. That is the standard. Ruthless internal audit, not comfortable self-improvement theater.
Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome from 161 to 180 AD, commanded legions and governed millions. He could have spent every evening in imperial luxury. Instead, he returned nightly to his journal, his instrument of prosoche, writing lines like, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." This was not philosophy for display. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Stoics were not scholars in the modern sense, passive readers accumulating citations. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, began his philosophical journey not in a lecture hall, but in a shipwreck that destroyed his merchant fortune around 300 BC. His crisis was the curriculum. The Stoics understood that suffering, difficulty, and resistance are not interruptions to growth. They are the precise mechanism of it. Study without confrontation with reality is just sophisticated entertainment.
The second element is train. Not for aesthetics, not for performance, not for the approval of strangers. Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's own teacher, argued with striking specificity that physical discipline is inseparable from philosophical progress. He wrote that the philosopher must train the body to endure cold, heat, thirst, and hard labor, because apatheia, freedom from enslaving passions, cannot be achieved by the mind alone. The body is not a vehicle for the soul. In Stoic doctrine, it is the testing ground of the soul's actual convictions.
Cato the Younger understood this with extraordinary literalness. He walked barefoot through Roman streets in winter, not for spectacle, but to condition his will against comfort's tyranny. He marched with his legions on foot when he could have ridden. He ate soldiers' rations when banquets were available. Every physical choice was a philosophical statement. I am not governed by what feels good. I am governed by what is right, what builds strength, what refuses the slow corruption of ease. Virtue, arete, requires a body that has learned obedience.
There is a modern corruption of the training principle worth naming precisely. The gym has become a theater of performance. Photographs, mirrors, public metrics. This is the direct opposite of what Musonius Rufus prescribed. When training becomes a display for external validation, it feeds the very passions Stoicism seeks to discipline. You are no longer building the soul, you are feeding vanity, what the Stoics classified among the adiaphora, the indifferents, things that carry no real moral weight regardless of how much cultural praise surrounds them.
Wait, what comes next is what few people truly understand, and what separates those who merely study Stoicism from those who are actually forged by it. The third element of the formula is shut up. This is not a metaphor. Seneca, writing from Rome around 65 AD, warned with surgical precision, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." He also observed that most people spend their words defending themselves, explaining themselves, advertising themselves, and in doing so, they leak the very energy that sustained transformation requires.
Seneca was explicit. Silence is not passivity. It is strategic containment of your developing self. When you announce your goals, your brain registers social approval as partial completion. The discipline dissolves before it has time to build roots. The Stoics called this logos, alignment with cosmic reason, the rational order underlying all things. Logos does not announce itself. It operates. Rivers do not explain where they are going. Gravity does not seek consensus. The philosopher who has internalized logos works in silence, because silence is the natural posture of genuine power accumulating. Tomorrow, when you wake up, do this exactly. Before you speak to anyone, before you open any application, sit for 10 minutes with your journal. Write one question only. Where yesterday
Did my actions contradict my stated values? Answer it without excuse. Then write the single most important disciplined action you will take today. Do not share it. Not with your partner. Not online. Not with colleagues. Let it remain internal, pressurized, directive. This is prosoche in daily practice. This is the formula, operational, not theoretical. In the winter of 177 AD, Marcus Aurelius led a brutal campaign along the Danube frontier against Germanic tribes. He was 60 years old, ill, exhausted, governing an empire fracturing at every edge. And every night in his campaign tent, by flickering lamplight, he wrote in his journal, not battle strategy, but philosophy. Lines like, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." No audience, no publication plan, just the formula. Study the self, train through the difficulty, shut up, and do the work.
Here is the revelation promised at the beginning. The noise around you, other people's opinions, their broadcasts of ambition, their constant performance, is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It shows you, in vivid and continuous demonstration, exactly what a life without this formula produces. Volume without depth, motion without direction, identity without foundation. Memento mori. Remember that time is finite. The years you spend explaining yourself instead of building yourself cannot be recovered. The formula is not complicated. Its execution requires everything. Study ruthlessly inward. Train without an audience. Shut up and let results speak with the authority that words never carry. This is the Stoic formula, not for comfort, but for the kind of person who endures. If this reflection has moved you, subscribe. Tomorrow, we examine what Marcus Aurelius did every night before sleep. The bell ensures you don't miss it. Now ask yourself, what one discipline, practiced in silence starting today, would change? You're sitting in silence, but your mind is a battlefield. Someone's words from yesterday, maybe a betrayal, maybe a small slight, are replaying on a loop. You can feel your jaw tighten. You can feel your chest harden. The cost isn't just discomfort. It's your clarity, your purpose, your entire day surrendered to something you cannot change. What if the real wound isn't what happened, but the throne you've given it inside you? 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius already knew the cure. We will move through 3 revelations tonight. First, why your mind is structurally designed to be a prisoner of events. Second, the precise Stoic architecture Marcus Aurelius built to achieve what the ancients called apatheia, not numbness, but sovereign freedom from disturbance. Third, the single discipline he practiced before every difficult day. But the deepest insight waits at the end, and it will fundamentally reframe what you call strength. Here is the wound most people carry without naming it. They believe the external world has direct power over their inner state. A colleague's dismissal ruins a morning. An unanswered message ruins a night. A stranger's glance on the street rewrites your self-perception for hours. This isn't weakness in the ordinary sense. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of where reality actually lives. And that misunderstanding is costing you something irreplaceable: the sovereignty of your own mind.
The Stoics had a precise, almost surgical name for this misunderstanding. Epictetus, who was born a slave in Hierapolis around 50 AD, identified it as the root of all human suffering, confusing what is up to us, our judgments, desires, responses, with what is not up to us, everything external. He called this framework the dichotomy of control, and it is not a comfort, it is a ruthless diagnosis. Most of your suffering, he argued, is self-administered.
But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Marcus Aurelius inherited an empire, the most powerful man on earth by all external measures. He could have lived as a man to whom everything bends. Instead, the private journals we now call the Meditations reveal a man at perpetual war with his own reactive mind. Power, he discovered, does not grant immunity to disturbance. That realization changed everything about how he chose to govern himself.
The core of Marcus Aurelius's inner architecture was a concept the Greeks called apatheia, a word violently misunderstood by modern translation. It does not mean apathy. It means the disciplined absence of disruptive passions, the freedom from rage, dread, craving, and grief that distort judgment. Apatheia is not the death of feeling. It is the refusal to let feeling become the hegemonicon, the ruling faculty of the soul. Marcus fought for this every single morning.
In Book 5 of the Meditations, written likely in the 170s AD during a military campaign in Germania, Marcus records his practice of prosoche, vigilant attention to the ruling mind. He writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But read the context. He wrote this before dawn, in a military tent, surrounded by plague and war. He wasn't philosophizing in comfort. He was fighting for his own soul.
And if this is stirring something in you, subscribe. What comes next will fundamentally change how you face tomorrow. The mechanism Marcus used was deceptively simple, but requires ruthless consistency. Every disturbing impression, every insult, setback, or fear must be intercepted before it colonizes the hegemonicon. The Stoics called this the pause of assent. Between stimulus and response exists a space. That space is the entire location of your freedom. Marcus trained it daily as other men trained for combat.
Seneca, writing from Rome around 65 AD, made the mechanism even more precise. In his letters to Lucilius, he described the practice of premeditatio malorum, the deliberate premeditation of adversity. Before each day, you rehearse what might go wrong, not to breed dread, but to strip events of their power to ambush the mind. When difficulty arrives as an expected guest rather than a sudden intruder, the hegemonicon remains sovereign. The emotion appears, it does not rule. Now consider the concept Marcus Aurelius returns to obsessively throughout the Meditations: amor fati, the love of fate. Not mere acceptance, not resignation, love. The Stoic imperative is not to endure what cannot be changed, but to genuinely will it as part of the logos, the rational order governing all things. When you practice amor fati, you remove the last lever by which external events can move you. You become, as Marcus wrote, like a rock against which waves break and fall back.
Wait. What comes next is what few people truly understand about Stoic freedom,
and it may overturn everything you believe about emotional strength. Most people confuse Stoic apatheia with suppression, the white-knuckling of feeling, the grinding down of experience. This is precisely wrong. The Stoics, following Chrysippus and Zeno of Citium, argued that the wise person still feels, but what they feel is not passion in the destructive sense. They feel eupatheiai, good emotions rooted in virtue, not in dependency on externals.
So, what does this look like in practice? Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, sit with this question Marcus Aurelius posed to himself daily. He called it his morning examination. What impression is trying to rule me today, and have I given it my assent? Name the specific fear, the specific resentment. Then apply the dichotomy of control. Is this within my power or not? If not, withdraw your assent completely. If yes, act on it with virtue. Do nothing in between.
The second practice. When someone or something provokes a reaction in you today, an email that offends, a delay that frustrates, a judgment that stings, insert a single deliberate breath before responding. Not a technique, a philosophical act. You are exercising the pause of assent that Marcus Aurelius described as the one unconquerable citadel. Epictetus called this discipline the chief task of life. Not achievement, not success, the mastery of your own response to living. In 175 AD, Marcus Aurelius faced the most personal betrayal of his reign. His most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor while Marcus was campaigning in the east. The Senate demanded Cassius's immediate execution. Marcus refused. In a letter preserved by the historian Cassius Dio, he wrote, "It is a misfortune for a man to be surprised by death before he has overcome his passions." He forgave Cassius publicly, not from weakness, but from apatheia. He would not be ruled by the wound. Here is the revelation promised at the opening. The art of letting nothing affect you is not the art of feeling nothing. It is the art of feeling everything while being ruled by nothing. Marcus Aurelius was not made of stone. He grieved, feared, struggled. What the Meditations reveal is a man who chose daily, through prosoche and premeditatio and amor fati, to place his hegemonicon beyond the reach of circumstance. That is not the absence of a soul. That is the fullness of one. The question Marcus Aurelius left us is not how do I stop being affected? It is who governs my inner world, events or my reasoned choice? If this reflection has moved something in you, subscribe. Tomorrow we go deeper into what Marcus Aurelius did each night before sleep. The bell ensures you don't miss it. Now ask yourself, what are you still allowing to rule you that you never consciously chose?